The Xylos Prime space station gleamed like a jewel against the backdrop of swirling nebula gases, its segmented rings rotating in perfect harmony. As one of the busiest interspecies hubs in this sector of the galaxy, it housed the prestigious Intergalactic Diplomatic Academy, where the brightest young minds from dozens of worlds came to study the delicate art of cross-species relations. Lyra adjusted her sensory appendages as she settled into her seat in the lecture hall. As a Xantid, her elegant mantis-like form allowed her to observe the social dynamics around her with particular precision. Her species was known for their analytical abilities and keen social intelligence, traits that had earned her a coveted scholarship to the Academy. Today, however, even her well-honed observational skills were being tested by the unusual tension in the air. The cause of this disturbance was seated 3 rows ahead. Alex Ryder, the first human student to ever attend the Academy. He had arrived 2 weeks late into the semester, looking exhausted and slightly overwhelmed in his standard-issue uniform that hung awkwardly on his frame. Unlike most species represented at the Academy, humans possessed no obvious evolutionary advantages. No protective exoskeleton like the Cthar, no telepathic abilities like the graceful Cillians, no immense strength like the gentle giant Grox. In fact, to Lyra's analytical eye, Alex seemed alarmingly vulnerable, with his soft exterior and apparent lack of natural defenses. Most students regarded the human with a mixture of curiosity and dismissal. Whispers about the fragility of humans had circulated since before his arrival, and his performance so far had done little to dispel those preconceptions. Look at its struggle. Rorik, a particularly arrogant Cthar, whispered to his group of friends as they watched Alex attempting to adjust the gravity settings on his workstation during high-gravity adaptation class. The Cthar-esque chitin plates gleamed with a meticulously polished sheen that spoke of wealth and status. I've heard they break bones from just falling down. How did such a species ever make it to space? Lyra observed as Alex wiped beads of moisture from his forehead, sweating, she recalled from her xenobiology readings. Many students found the process disgusting, referring to it as leaking, though Lyra found it fascinating from a biological perspective. "Mr. Ryder," called out the instructor, "perhaps you'd like to demonstrate the proper stance for maintaining equilibrium in a 3G environment." Alex stepped forward, his movements careful but determined. When the gravity increased, he immediately sank lower than intended, his knees buckling slightly. Several students tittered. Rorik made a sound that approximated laughter through his respiratory spiracles. Alex managed to correct his stance, but it was clear that maintaining it caused him considerable strain. By the end of the demonstration, he was drenched in sweat and breathing heavily. Similar scenes played out across various classes. In basic telepathic communications, Alex couldn't even participate meaningfully, as humans lack the neural structures necessary for even the most rudimentary psychic exchange. In environmental adaptation, his need for frequent hydration and rest breaks became a running joke among some of the more competitive students. "I don't understand why they even admitted one of its kind," Rorik commented loudly during lunch period, deliberately within Alex's hearing range. Diplomatic immunity isn't going to help much when its body crushes under pressure. Literally. Lyra felt a twinge of sympathy as Alex pretended not to hear, focusing intently on his nutrient tray. She had to admit, though, that she shared some of the general skepticism. How could a species with such apparent biological limitations hope to compete in the rigorous academy program? No one was more vocal about this perspective than Dr. Forlag, the comparative biology instructor. A tall, gaunt Helverin with translucent skin that revealed the complex system of organs beneath, Dr. Forlag approached biology with cold efficiency, valuing evolutionary advantages above all else. "Mr. Ryder," Dr. Forlag called out during one particularly uncomfortable session, "please enlighten us as to how your species compensates for its lack of exoskeletal protection, telepathic capabilities, enhanced strength, regenerative abilities, or indeed any significant evolutionary advantage that I can discern." The entire class went silent. Alex cleared his throat. "We adapt, sir. We create tools, we work together, and we endure." Fascinating, Dr. Forlag replied, his tone suggesting the opposite. A species that survives on determination rather than biological fitness. How? Quaint. After 3 weeks at the academy, Alex had settled into a routine of quiet persistence. He wasn't failing his classes, but he wasn't excelling either. Most students had lost interest in him, relegating him to the background of academy life as an unremarkable curiosity. That was about to change dramatically. The incident occurred during Dr. Forlag's practical laboratory session. The assignment involved analyzing the neural system of a native Xylos prime creature, a small, quick-moving razor critter with highly toxic spines that deployed when threatened. Safety protocols were stringent. The creatures were sedated and contained in specialized force field enclosures while students collected data on their unique nervous systems. Alex was methodically preparing his workstation, carefully calibrating his instruments according to the guidelines. His movements were precise, economical, betraying none of the clumsiness others expected from him. Lyra, whose station was adjacent to his, noted this with mild surprise. Despite his physical limitations in other contexts, the human displayed noteworthy fine motor control. Rorik and 2 of his friends were working at the station behind Alex, their chitinous appendages occasionally making it difficult to manipulate the more delicate equipment. As Rorik reached across his workspace, his armor-plated elbow struck the edge of Alex's table. Whether it was deliberate or accidental became instantly irrelevant as Alex's containment field flickered and failed. The razor critter, partially roused from sedation by the disruption, reacted instinctively. Before the automated security system could re-establish containment, the creature launched one of its toxic spines. The spine embedded itself deeply in Alex's forearm. Chaos erupted in the laboratory. Students backed away in alarm, some emitting warning pheromones or distress calls in their native communications. Dr. Forlag shouted for emergency medical assistance, his normally composed demeanor cracking. "Everyone back. The toxin can cause paralysis or death if not treated immediately. Medical team to biology lab for Priority Alpha." Lyra froze, her analytical mind struggling to process the scene. What captured her attention wasn't the escaped specimen, now neutralized by the security system, but Alex. The human was staring at his arm with an expression she couldn't quite interpret. Red fluid, blood, she recalled, was seeping from around the embedded spine, a startlingly vivid color compared to the blue, green, or clear circulatory fluids of most species she was familiar with. Rorik seemed frozen in place, his posture communicating a mix of regret and a certain vindictive satisfaction. Others edged further away, repulsed or frightened by the alien blood and the potential for contamination. What happened next would later be referenced in numerous xenoanthropology papers and academy legends. "Lyra," Alex said calmly, his voice steady despite the toxic spine protruding from his flesh. "Could you hand me the extraction forceps from the dissection kit, please?" Too stunned to do anything but comply, Lyra passed him the instrument. The entire class watched in disbelief as Alex carefully but firmly grasped the base of the spine with the forceps. With a single smooth motion, he extracted the spine, a small fountain of red following its removal. Instead of calling out in pain or waiting for the medical team, Alex reached into his personal bag and withdrew a small kit. "Always carry a first aid kit," he explained to no one in particular, his tone conversational despite the circumstances. Basic survival training. The laboratory had fallen into an astonished silence, broken only by the sound of Alex tearing open an antiseptic wipe. He efficiently cleaned the puncture wound, which was now bleeding freely. Then, to the utter amazement of everyone present, he removed a small sealed package from his kit, opened it, and extracted a curved needle already attached to a length of sterile suture material. "This is going to need stitches," he commented, as casually as if discussing the weather. Without hesitation, he began to suture his own wound. Lyra observed with fascinating horror as the needle pierced Alex's skin repeatedly. The human's face showed only minimal signs of discomfort, a slight tightening around the eyes, a barely perceptible clenching of his jaw. No anesthetic, no pain suppressants, just methodical, precise movements as he closed the wound with neat, evenly spaced stitches. The entire room remained in stunned silence, the only sounds being Alex's steady breathing and the slight whisper of the suture material as it pulled through flesh. Rorick's mandibles hung open in shock. Even Dr. Forlag seemed transfixed, his data pad forgotten in his hands. By the time the medical team arrived, Alex was applying a sterile dressing to his now-closed wound. The lead medic, a Tellurian with 6 highly specialized manipulator limbs, scanned the injury with obvious confusion. "You've treated yourself?" the medic asked. "Basic field medicine," Alex replied with a small shrug. "I extracted the spine quickly to minimize toxin spread, cleaned the wound, and sutured it to prevent further blood loss. I'd still appreciate an antitoxin if you have one compatible with human physiology." The medical scan confirmed what seemed impossible. Alex had successfully removed nearly all the toxin through prompt extraction, and his suture work was, in the medic's own words, remarkably precise for field conditions. As Alex was escorted to the medical bay for observation and antitoxin administration, the laboratory remained in stunned silence. It was Rorick who finally spoke, his voice lacking its usual arrogant edge. "Did everyone just see what I saw?" The whispers began immediately, spreading throughout the academy with remarkable speed. By the following day, Alex Rider was no longer the unremarkable human curiosity. He had become the topic of intense discussion and reevaluation. Lyra found herself fielding questions from other students about the human's behavior. Even her fellow Xantids, normally reserved and analytical, expressed fascination. "Was there really no vocalization of pain?" asked a Cillian classmate during shared meal period. "None," Lyra confirmed. His vital signs indicated pain response, elevated pulse, pupil dilation, but he displayed remarkable control. It was impressive. When Alex returned to classes the following day, the atmosphere had shifted noticeably. Students who had previously ignored him now watched with new interest. Several approached him directly, inquiring about human medical training, pain tolerance, and earth cultural practices. A group of medical students invited him to give a presentation on human field medicine and pain management techniques. The environmental adaptation instructor requested his input on a discussion about psychological versus physiological endurance. Even the telepathic communications professor found a new angle, asking Alex to describe how humans compensated for their lack of psychic abilities through nonverbal communication cues. Rorick's attitude underwent the most dramatic transformation. The Cthar approached Alex during physical training, visibly uncomfortable but determined. "Your actions in the laboratory were unanticipated," Rorick stated, the closest his cultural framework allowed to an apology. "I request joint training sessions. My species has superior strength, but perhaps lacks certain adaptability." Alex accepted with a grace that further impressed Lyra. She found herself spending more time with the human, fascinated by the contrast between his seemingly fragile exterior and the mental fortitude he had displayed. "On Earth, we have a long history of having to adapt and overcome," Alex explained during one conversation. "Humans aren't the strongest, fastest, or most naturally protected species, even on our own planet. We survived through ingenuity, cooperation, and sheer stubborn persistence. But the pain," Lyra pressed, still unable to fully comprehend. "How did you manage it so calmly?" Alex considered the question thoughtfully. "Pain is information," he finally said. "Useful information about damage to the body, but still just information. With practice, you can acknowledge it without letting it override your thinking. Soldiers, emergency workers, explorers, many humans train to function despite pain when necessary." Dr. Forlag, too, seemed to reassess his position. In his next lecture, he introduced a new module on psychological adaptive mechanisms as evolutionary advantages, using Alex's demonstration of pain management and crisis response as a primary example. "It appears," he announced to the class, that evolution has more paths to success than the purely biological. The human capacity for enduring and functioning under duress represents a different but equally valid adaptive strategy. This new respect was about to be tested far beyond a laboratory incident. 3 days later, alarms blared throughout Xylo's Prime. Attention all residents and personnel. The announcement echoed through every corridor and chamber. A severe magneto-ionic storm is approaching the station. Magnitude classification, extreme. Estimated time to impact, 4 hours. All non-essential personnel report to designated shelter areas. Emergency response teams to your stations. The Academy quickly organized volunteer student teams to assist with preparations and response. To Lyra's surprise, many students specifically requested Alex for their groups. The human stock had risen dramatically after the laboratory incident, with many now viewing his crisis management skills as potentially valuable. Alex was assigned to the technical and logistics support team, along with Lyra, Rorik, and several others. Their task was to prepare emergency supplies and assist with securing vulnerable station sections. As they worked, more details about the approaching storm emerged, each update more concerning than the last. This is going to be worse than predicted, their team coordinator informed them grimly. The magnetic interference is already affecting primary systems. We're seeing power fluctuations in the outer rings. The situation deteriorated rapidly as the storm's leading edge reached the station. Lights flickered, communication systems became unreliable, and the subtle hum of environmental systems that normally faded into the background became jarringly irregular. Just as the team was completing their assigned tasks, an urgent request came through the emergency channels. We need a volunteer team to Auxiliary Power Hub C, the static-filled message relayed. Manual activation of the backup power cells is required for the medical wing. Automated systems have failed. Critical life support for specialized environments is at risk. Alex stepped forward immediately. I'll go. Lyra joined him, along with Rorik and 2 others, a Cillian named Taris and a Grok named Murv. The team coordinator hesitated, eyeing the human dubiously despite recent events. Hub C is in an older section of the station, the coordinator warned. It will be dangerous getting there, especially with systems failing. The magnetic interference will affect navigation, lighting, door mechanisms, everything. All the more reason to move quickly, Alex replied, already gathering emergency supplies. Lives depend on it. The journey to Auxiliary Power Hub C quickly proved every bit as hazardous as warned. They had barely left the relative safety of the Academy wing when the primary lighting failed completely, leaving only the dim emergency strips to guide their way. The corridors leading to the older sections were increasingly treacherous. Maintenance panels had shaken loose, debris littered the path, and several doors required manual override. The magnetic storm intensified, creating localized electromagnetic pulses that disrupted equipment and affected some team members physiologically. Taris pressed a slender hand to her temple, her luminescent eyes dimming in pain. The magnetic fluctuations, they're interfering with my neural pathways. It feels like static in my mind. Rorik was experiencing his own difficulties. My sensory input is scrambled, he admitted with obvious reluctance. I can't distinguish directional cues properly. Even Murv, whose species was known for their resilience, showed signs of distress as the environmental systems faltered, causing temperature and atmospheric pressure to fluctuate wildly. Alex, though visibly affected by the harsh conditions, sweating profusely, breathing labored in the thinning air, maintained a focused calm that Lyra found increasingly remarkable. When they encountered a sealed pressure door that wouldn't respond to override codes, Alex quickly assessed the situation. The electronic mechanism is fried, but these older sections have mechanical backups, he explained, kneeling to examine the door's lower panel. Using a multi-tool from his pack, he pried open a maintenance hatch and exposed a complex array of wires and hydraulic components. On Earth, we still use similar systems in some remote facilities, he muttered, more to himself than the others as he worked. After several tense minutes of manipulating the internal mechanisms, the door shuttered and partially opened, just enough for them to squeeze through. "How did you know how to do that?" Rorik asked, genuine curiosity replacing his usual condescension. "Hobby," Alex replied with a slight smile. "I restore antique mechanical devices." The principles don't change much across civilizations. Engineers tend to think alike. As they progressed deeper into the station's older sections, their communication devices failed completely. The air grew thinner, and temperature control became increasingly erratic. When Muir stumbled, disoriented by a sudden drop in oxygen levels, Alex immediately shared his emergency oxygen supplement. "Breathe slowly," he instructed. "Make it last." When they encountered a corridor section where exposed conduits sparked dangerously with electrical discharge, Alex improvised a shield using discarded maintenance panels, protecting the team as they passed through. "Where did you learn all this?" Lyra asked as they paused at a junction to consult their increasingly unreliable map. "Earth has harsh environments too," Alex replied simply. "Mountains, deserts, oceans. I was part of an emergency response team before joining the diplomatic service. You learn to work with what you have." Rorik, who had initially attempted to assert leadership based on his physical superiority, gradually deferred to Alex's practical problem-solving and calm direction. The Kthar's respect was visibly growing with each obstacle they overcame. When they finally reached Auxiliary Power Hub C, they found a situation worse than anticipated. The main control panel had suffered significant damage from power surges. The backup batteries needed to be manually connected to the medical wing's power grid, requiring direct coupling of massive energy conduits under hazardous conditions. "The coupling points are in that maintenance shaft," Taris observed, pointing to a narrow-access tunnel lined with exposed circuitry and superheated components. "It's too narrow for Muir or Rorik with their body mass." "I can do it," Rorik insisted, attempting to fit his armored form into the opening. After several failed attempts that only resulted in further damage to the already compromised systems, he backed away in frustrated defeat. "My appendages are too large for the coupling mechanism," he admitted, "and the heat is affecting my sensory receptors." "I'll go," Alex said quietly. Before anyone could object, he was removing his outer protective gear, keeping only the thinnest layer of clothing. "What are you doing?" Lyra asked, alarmed. "The protective gear is for your safety. It's too bulky for the space," Alex explained, "and I need manual dexterity for the couplings." He kept only a thin pair of gloves from his emergency kit. "These are fire-resistant. They'll have to do." The maintenance shaft was barely wider than Alex's shoulders. Heat radiated from the malfunctioning systems, and occasional electrical discharges filled the cramped space with blinding light. Lyra and the others could only watch as Alex crawled deeper into the shaft, disappearing from view except for the occasional glimpse of his boots. They could hear his labored breathing and muffled exclamations of pain as he encountered hot components or received mild electrical shocks. Several agonizing minutes passed. "Almost there," Alex's strained voice called back. "The primary coupling is damaged. I'll need to bypass it. Redirect through secondary channels." More sounds of struggling, a sharp cry of pain quickly suppressed, then the distinctive heavy click of massive connectors engaging. First coupling complete. The emergency lights in the hub flickered, then strengthened slightly. Indicators on the still-functioning portions of the control panel showed power beginning to flow to the medical wing. "Two more to go," came Alex's determined voice. The second coupling was completed with similar difficulty. For the third, however, there was a prolonged silence after Alex's indication that he was beginning the connection. "Alex," Lyra called into the shaft. "Status report?" No response. Rorik moved closer to the entrance. "Human? Respond." After a tense moment, they heard movement, followed by Alex's voice, noticeably weaker. "Final coupling is jammed. Need to apply more force." They heard a grunt of effort, then a cry of unmistakable pain, followed immediately by the heavy thunk of the final connection engaging. The hub's systems surged to life, power flowing steadily to the critical medical systems. Moments later, Alex emerged from the maintenance shaft, dragging himself out with visible effort. His exposed skin was reddened from heat, marked with minor burns and electrical contact points. Blood seeped through his uniform in several places where sharp components had caught him. His right hand was clutched protectively against his chest. The glove partially melted to his skin. Despite his obvious pain, his first words were, "Did it work? Is power restored to medical?" Taris checked the now-functioning display. Full power restored to all critical medical systems. "You did it, Alex." The human allowed himself a small smile before his knees buckled. Rorik moved with surprising speed for his bulk, catching Alex before he hit the floor. "Foolishly brave," the Cathar muttered, but his tone carried unmistakable respect. "Let's get you back to the central hub." The return journey was slower but less perilous, as the station's systems gradually stabilized with the storm's passing. They were met by emergency medical personnel who immediately took Alex for treatment. As they separated, Rorik performed a formal Cathar salute, a gesture of warriors' respect rarely offered to other species. The storm's aftermath brought a new dawn to Xylo's Prime, both literally and figuratively. The station had weathered the celestial assault with remarkably few casualties, thanks in large part to the successful restoration of power to critical systems. When Alex returned to the academy 3 days later, his right hand and forearm wrapped in regenerative bandages, he was greeted with a hero's welcome. Students from all species approached to express gratitude and admiration. Those with family members in the medical wing were particularly effusive, knowing how close their loved ones had come to losing life-sustaining support. In a formal assembly, the academy director acknowledged the efforts of all emergency teams, with special recognition for the mission to Power Hub C. When Alex was called forward, the applause was thunderous, participated in even by species whose biology didn't naturally lend itself to such expressions. Rorik approached Alex afterward, performing again the formal Cathar salute, this time in public. "I misjudged you and your species," he stated clearly, mandibles clicking in a gesture of formal apology. "Strength wears many forms. Yours is not in chitin or muscle, but in spirit and tenacity. These two are worthy of respect." Dr. Forlag, in his next lecture, devoted an entire session to reviewing fundamental assumptions about evolutionary advantages. The recent events have provided us with a powerful real-world demonstration of an often overlooked truth, he told the silent classroom. Physical attributes are merely one aspect of species fitness. Psychological resilience, adaptability, and problem-solving under duress are equally valid evolutionary strategies. Mr. Ryder's actions exemplify how a species can thrive not through biological superiority, but through mental fortitude and the determination to endure beyond what seems physically possible. The relationship between Alex and his alien classmates transformed profoundly in the following weeks. The Academy established an interspecies survival skills club, with Alex serving as co-instructor, sharing human approaches to crisis management while learning techniques from other worlds. Lyra and Alex developed a particularly close friendship, each fascinated by the other's perspective. For Lyra, Alex represented a new dimension in her understanding of resilience. For Alex, Lyra's analytical approach provided valuable insights into interspecies dynamics he would need in his diplomatic career. Even Rorik, once the embodiment of biological elitism, became a regular companion. The Kthar's physical prowess complemented Alex's improvisational skills, and they often collaborated on training scenarios that combined both approaches. 3 months after the storm, as a new batch of students arrived at the academy, Lyra observed Alex explaining Earth customs to a curious group by one of the observatory windows. The massive viewport framed the spangled infinity beyond, stars and nebulae painting the cosmos in breathtaking color. On Earth, Alex was saying, we have a concept called humanity. It originally just meant being human, but it evolved to represent qualities we aspire to: compassion, courage, resilience, the desire to connect across differences. Is that why your species joined the intergalactic community? A young Tellurian asked. To connect with different life forms? Alex smiled. catching Lyra's eye across the room. Partly, but also because we recognize something important. True strength isn't about having the toughest armor or the sharpest claws. It's about adaptation, cooperation, and never giving up, even when the odds seem impossible. That's something we can all share, regardless of our biology. As if to emphasize his point, Rorik joined them, his once intimidating presence now a symbol of how perceptions could change. Together, the once unlikely friends gazed out at the stars, each different, yet each contributing to the same brilliant tapestry of light against the darkness. In that moment, Lyra understood a profound truth. The universe's greatest strength lay not in uniformity, but in diversity, not in competition, but in cooperation. The human who had arrived, seeming so fragile, had taught them all that true power came from within, and that difference was not weakness, but the foundation for growth and shared understanding. Humans, with their fragile bodies and indomitable spirit, had brought something invaluable to the intergalactic community, the power of never giving up.